The migrant labor system created, as Sarah Mukumedi puts it, distance that made a very big gap between husband and wife. As Dinah McLaughlin says, you had children with a person you had no relationship with. So the women are talking about their lives prior to 1970 as not having been heavily impacted by apartheid, except for the impacts of the labor system. They were living prior to 1970 in rural, extensive countryside where they had very extensive farms owned by their kin groups and overseen by the women. The women recall these countryside homes prior to 1970, in a very nostalgic register. They talk about the region of the countryside as their home, and they describe life there as healthy, as traditional, as unencumbered. As Mijaji Ndlovu says, back then there was enough land, there was water in the rivers, everyone ate from the big gardens. And Dinah Beloy says, we had to cook with a big pot. We had space for sorghum, we had space for maize, and so on. These reminiscences make clear that for these women, land continues to signify home in a really profound way. Land continues to be the space of belonging. By comparison, the village into which they were forced to move by the Homeland Government in 1970, they think of as a space of lack, a space of lack of abundance, lack of the abundance and the livelihoods and the health of the countryside. A space of precarity, a space of structural violence. So the women's households were chased, to use their term, from the countryside, from their farms to the formal village spaces, beginning in 1970 and continuing into 71. They were chased there by the Homeland Government, which was operating on behalf of the national government and operating through their own local chiefs. They call these spaces the lines, referring to the grid pattern of the village. And they were placed there under a national policy that was called rural betterment. The idea was that African people inhabited a wasteful and a backward subsistence economy, and they needed to be bettered. They needed to be taught the path to progress, to commercial agriculture, and so on. As Mpepu says, they didn't better anything. They destroyed our communities, referring to the period when the government forced them to move into the village. Her husband Daniel says, I can't find words to express the losses, referring to the loss of those countryside farms, the loss of home, the loss of the graves of the ancestors. It was heavy, but who were you going to complain to? It wasn't only happening in Jopi, it was happening across South Africa.